Ready to hit the pause button on your parenting fails? Ready to feel better about your parenting? Welcome to Parenting Pause, the podcast, where all of you is welcome and where you can listen in on how other parents became the parents they always dreamed of being. I'm Leslie Potter, the founder of the Pure Joy Parenting Way. I'm a mother, a parenting coach, and a fellow traveler on this journey to wake up in our parenting. And I believe together we can make this a better world for ourselves and our kiddos. Today I'm welcoming Nina, the mom of a 12-year-old son. Nina is a homeschooling mom who began to question why it was so difficult to find time for herself and her needs. As she began to explore her early survival strategy of caring for others over herself, she began to understand why it was so challenging to include her needs and to make them important. Learning to honor herself and set healthy personal boundaries made room for her son to show up in the relationship in a very different way. Hello, Mama. Thanks for sharing your
Hi.
journey with us today.
Yeah.
So my first question is, what was going on in your home when you reached out to me?
Well, I had come to a point where I was feeling really overwhelmed by my son's needs and dependency on me, and I felt really trapped, and I didn't know how to change that dynamic. I don't think I knew that I could, that I was entitled to change that dynamic. So I was really at a very stuck place and was feeling resentful and just really wanting things to be different, but not sure how to begin that process.
Yeah, that's a great one because I love when you're talking about, it felt like he was so dependent and that's what you were really
Mhm.
working on trying to shift. And yet I know
Mhm.
in our journey, what we began to explore and find out was how challenging that was when he did start to get more independent.
Yeah, absolutely. It was funny because I would really struggle with the times that he wanted to differentiate himself in our relationship, wanting to do something different than I wanted him to do. I would take it very personally. And there was this push-pull of wanting him to be more independent, yet when he exhibited that, that wasn't always easy for me to handle. And then I would want to try to control things so that didn't have to feel that hurt or
Yeah.
rejection. Mhm.
Yeah, it's just such a crazy one. I just love that you're bringing this because I kind of had that same thing, It was like I so wanted my daughter to get off my leg, because she was always holding on
Mhm.
to my leg, and I couldn't walk past the car without her freaking out or walk away from the car. And then when we actually moved to co-housing and she became this like independent little wild child running around with her friends, I was like, wow. So it's so cool to play with this because I think we all have these ideas of what we want, and then we have these what you're describing, these contradictory feelings that actually we have
Mhm.
to tolerate to actually get to where we want to go. So tell me a little bit about what that looked like. Like I know when you first came, you said you would even get him water all the time at the table, or,
Mhm.
there were so
Mhm.
many, maybe you could just describe, what you were giving up to meet his dependency needs.
Yeah, it was a lot, from the moment I would wake up in the morning, I was doing things for him, from getting him up in the morning to leave the house to making all of his food and yeah, with the water, that was a big one where he didn't want to get himself a glass of water or refill his glass. And that was a really charged issue. And I did it because it felt easier than having to deal with the conflict or the emotional explosion that would happen if I did say no or not right now or I can do it later or how about you try this yourself. I was just really afraid of the emotional intensity. So all of that was really to try to avoid having to encounter that.
You felt like you were walking on eggshells and
Mhm.
feeling a bit like you were being held hostage by your son's intensity.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
yeah, so what began to happen? Like, walk us through because it's very different today. I just want to say that. I want to remind you how different it is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is different. Of course, I still have my moments of going backward, but yeah, I mean, there were a few things that really kind of connected for me. I mean, one of the big ones was that I really didn't feel entitled to my own needs and my own wants and desires. I felt like being a good mother meant surrendering that and accommodating my kid so that he didn't have to feel upset and I didn't have to feel upset. So that was a big one, that I had really put myself on the back burner because I thought that's what I was supposed to do. And also getting more comfortable with my own intensity and his intensity, that helped a lot too, because then I didn't feel like I have to avoid this at any cost. And then a real conflict arose between my realizing that yes, I am entitled to things for myself and taking care of myself, and this avoidance of emotion. Well, that can't coexist, because there is going to be emotion, there is going to be intensity, and that became, I guess, a trade-off I felt more comfortable with, and I felt less afraid of my son's intensity and of my own. I felt like I could tolerate it more when I was really clear about what my need was in the moment. When I really accepted that and embraced that, it was a lot easier to kind of feel some separation between whatever his reaction was and what my need was in the moment. So I could so much better tolerate his feelings when I set a limit or a boundary. And of course, everything, it's still there. It didn't go away, but it's not as scary and it's not ruling my behavior in the same way it did before.
And what were some of those intense feelings that you had to feel when you began to take care of yourself and set those personal boundaries?
Oh gosh, I felt like, I mean, I had a lot of fear around feeling like I was rejecting my son, I was abandoning him, I was a terrible mother, that it was my job to take care of him and others. It was really a lot of intense feelings. And sometimes my son would tell me that I was being selfish and how could I not want to do these things for him? That was tough.
Well, I want to speak to that just for a moment of how beautiful this was that you went through this process because those were the feelings that you really had to repress and disown as a young child to survive in your
Mhm.
family. You had to be the caretaker of
Mhm.
others. You had to give up your needs. And if you did, live out your needs, most likely you were in some way, it was insinuated that you were selfish or abandoning or
Mhm.
rejecting of the other. So I
Mhm.
just want everyone to know it takes so much courage to, it's like a counter instinctual move, right? When I said, okay, Nina, you're going to have to go back and feel rejecting, abandoning, and selfish,
Mhm.
right? It's kind of like, are you
Right.
kidding?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
as you began to do this, what did you find out with your son? Because your terror and your fear was he was going to, blow up and have these wild, crazy responses, right?
Right. Yes. And it really was very different than what I had imagined. I mean, of course, there have been times that he has been really upset about something I've said no to, or, something I wanted to do for myself. But it was never, the actual experience was never as awful as my imagined version of it. And it was usually very short lived, and he would have his feelings about things or express what he was thinking, and then it was kind of done. We would just kind of move on from that, or he would be able to move on from that. never as difficult as I imagined that it would be. So that was a real surprise. And I think having that experience a few times also made it easier for me to keep going on this path, because I could remember, like, okay, yes, I might feel scared of what his reaction is going to be or how it's going to be, but the reality of it is really never been what I thought it would be.
So give us an example of how it looks today.
Well, let's use the water, the filling up
Yeah.
his glass of water example, because that was a big one. And even after other things had shifted, that was something that was still kind of tough, that he still really wanted me to get water for him. And the way that started to shift was, it wasn't like I went from one day refilling his glass every time he asked to the next day saying, nope, I'm not doing that for you anymore. It really started with, like if we were eating dinner and I had just sat down and was starting my meal, it started with me feeling that I'm entitled to enjoy my meal, or that's what I want to do. I want to enjoy my meal. I'm not going to be getting up, right now. And so I started with saying, I'd be happy to help you with that. And I'm going to finish my meal first. And, when I get up, I'd be happy to help you get you some water. And so there was some grumbling from him about that, but just doing that was really empowering for me to be able to put myself first. And then after doing that for a while, which is really very genuine, because I didn't mind helping him with this if I was getting up anyway. But that just kind of evolved into him doing this for himself now. I mean, sometimes he still asks me, and if I'm up and I don't mind doing it for him, I'm happy to do it. But more and more, he's doing it for himself, and he's not grumbling about it. He's just taking care of it. So that's been a big shift.
I love this. I mean, you just said it so poignantly. When I gave myself permission to make my needs as important as his, not more important or less, but I included myself in the mix. I'm happy to get that for you after I'm done eating or when I get up. Yeah, and I know you've done this around the shower, because the shower was a difficult place. Maybe
Oh,
you can.
yes.
Yeah.
The shower was a big one. The shower was a theme, right, for months and months and months during our conversations. So my son was a big fan of taking baths. He did not want to take showers. He was very against showers. He had a whole list of reasons why. And we had to remodel a bathroom, and that bathroom had the only bathtub in the house. So that meant for a period of, it wound up being close to 2 months, there was only a shower available for bathing. And so that was a big process, talking about this change and this transition. And at first my son said, well, then I guess I'm just not going to be showering, for 2 months. I'm not going to be bathing at all. But the process was really amazing. It went from, he did ultimately decide that he was willing to shower, but he wanted me to be in the bathroom with him. Of course he wanted me to help him wash his hair. He wanted me actively involved. He found the whole thing just so overwhelming. Over a period of time, he was willing to take on the shower on his own. And there were periods of time along the way where, I really didn't I had reached the point where I was really ready to, let him be in charge of this showering on his own. And so I was able to communicate that to him and let him know what I was willing to do. And over time, he was able to take on this responsibility on his own. And now he takes a shower by himself. And our bathroom is working again. We have a bathtub, but he's still showering, and he handles it on his own completely. And so that was a huge growth point for him and for me.
Yeah, and I really want to stress this point. Often we get into the all or nothing, and I think that's what it was for you. It was like, I will sacrifice completely, or I don't want to do this at all, right?
Right.
And
Right.
and I don't think that's ever true for us. I think, we worked with you so long on that you always have something to offer, but it's not
Mhm.
everything that he wants because that would not be
Right.
including you in the mix. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was really powerful experience for me because I think I had looked at the shower and other examples in that it was all or nothing. That I would kind of reach a breaking point of like, I don't want to do this anymore.
Mhm.
Um, but that there was always middle ground. And yes, there were always things that I was willing to offer and that there could be a negotiation and that he didn't have to, be completely on his own all of a sudden when I really had been helping him pretty significantly up until that point. But that was a really powerful experience for me to see those shades of gray and to see that this was a process. It wasn't going from yes to no. There was a lot of in between.
Yeah, I call it, we often go from rescue to abandonment, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the rescue is because we don't wanna tolerate those feelings. We're gonna have to feel if we let go a little bit or start taking care of
Mm-hmm.
ourselves. But if we sacrifice so much, which is what you did, then we get to that place where we finally say, "Forget it." Right? That
Right.
goes to the abandonment.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, just do it yourself. And you had a,
Mm-hmm.
very dependent son. I mean, he had
Yes.
worked great in your pattern. He had been the perfect kid
Mm-hmm.
for you to
Mm-hmm.
sacrifice yourself to care for others.
Mm-hmm.
So, what you did so beautifully in your work was you began to really delve into that early strategy that you were the one that wanted to update that instead of your son
Mm-hmm.
was a dependent kid and was never going to be able to be independent. Powerful movement, mama.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah. Yeah.
So, what do you find most challenging about parenting this way versus parenting in the old way for you?
I think that as I've given myself more of a voice in the relationship with my son, I also have learned to get more comfortable with him having a voice. And that's hard sometimes, because it's not always easy to negotiate. And yet, I find that when I am willing to do that, things go well because we each have things that we're willing to offer and things that maybe we're not willing to offer. But that is probably one of the harder things for me to keep in mind, that this is a relationship, that we can both ask for things. And sometimes he asks for things that, you know, I'm not sure if I want to give, and I have to think about how to respond to that. But the benefits are pretty huge, but it's definitely looking at treating the relationship as more of a give and take is new, and I like it, but it's still hard sometimes, and it's easy for me to fall back into trying to control as opposed to working with my son, keeping both of our needs in mind, and to make it more of a negotiation as opposed to me just saying this is how it's going to be.
Right. Or you can have whatever you want, or no,
Mm,
right? Right.
right, exactly.
Well, I think you had one recently, like he had a little friend that maybe wanted to spend some time with him. And, of course, he was
Yes,
gonna want you to drive him, wherever. And at first, we talked about this. You kind of wanted to say, well, you're too young for that and you don't need to do that. But we really
right.
shifted that, right, into what did you
Mhm.
want to offer?
Yes, that was really powerful because yes, my first because I think what came up for me when he first made the request was I don't think I want to do that, but instead of being clear about all right, what do I have to offer in this situation and what is my limit, I wanted to talk myself and talk him kind of out of the idea as opposed to just, listening to what was coming up for me and letting him know what I had to offer in the situation.
So, what would you like to say to any other parents listening if they might be struggling in some of these ways? And I think most of us do these days that we're trying to be conscious. We kind of think we have to give our children everything they need, meet all their needs on demand, right? That was my fallacy or my
Mhm.
fantasy. So, what would you like to
Mhm.
tell other parents?
Well, I guess I would say that when I first started feeling overwhelmed, resentful, feeling like the way I had set up the relationship with my son wasn't working for me, I didn't listen to that, or didn't listen to myself, didn't listen to my instincts for a really long time because I felt guilty and I felt like I was being a bad mom for wanting something different, wanting to take better care of myself. And I'm really grateful that I initiated this process, even though it was scary and even though it was really counter to how I thought I was supposed to be parenting. So I guess I would say that if anyone is having that inkling that something doesn't feel right, to give themselves permission to explore that.
Beautiful. Yeah. I think that's one of the most powerful things and one of the maybe most difficult things for I know for me as a mama was to admit to myself that, this fantasy of how I thought it was going to be was not working and the person that needed to shift was me. Right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Because I was spending so
Right.
much time trying to control her and get her to get it. And when I was able to get the support to turn back inward, we've talked about this for you often. I'll often say, turn the bus around and come back inside.
Mhm.
You just, so beautifully have taken, this on. You've become a loving, kind presence toward the part of you that you had to learn to repress as a child to survive. Thank you so much for being here and being willing to share your journey. It's always such a pleasure for me to hear.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for asking me.
And if you enjoyed this interview, I would love for you to go and put a review up so we can share this with as many people as possible. And if you would like more information about working together, you can check out www.purejoyparenting.com. And I just want to thank Nina for being here and sharing her beautiful journey of turning back within and learning that her needs matter. Parenting Paused is produced by Kim Paletti at Sound Mind Productions. Music by Jan Perchik. You can find the show notes at www.purejoyparenting.com, where you'll get access to the foundational practice of Pure Joy, the safe seat, and find links to relevant topics, as well as a transcription of the show. And if this work inspires you and you would like to practice, come join us in my free Pure Joy Parenting Practice group. You'll find the link in the show notes. Thank you for being here today and listening to the Parenting Pause podcast, your partner and support in finding the joy in yourself and with your children. And remember, if you're about to scream, pause.